afternoon. My name is Maria Juarez, and I'm the Chief Program Officer. We have a fun-filled meeting planned for you. Hopefully we can answer all your meetings during this pre-bid conference. Just to remind everyone, at the end of the pre-bid conference, when we close it, you will have an opportunity to submit written questions in our CAP system until March 5th, 2025 at 4 o'clock. So if there were questions that you didn't think of during the pre-bid, you will still have an opportunity after the pre-bid closes to submit those written questions. You just have to submit them in the CAP system. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Tricia to start the general information section of the pre-bid conference.
Thank you, Maria. My name is Tricia Dowell. I'm one of the Assistant Directors in Program Services. And as Maria mentioned, I'm going to go over some of the general information, and we're going to start on page 14 if you have the document. If not, it will be shared on the screen. So the cone of silence, as soon as a procurement is advertised, CSC staff are under a cone of silence. So the only time that we can answer verbal questions about the procurement is during this pre-bid conference. And the only time we can accept written questions is during the period for submission of written questions via CAPS. And as Maria mentioned, for this procurement, the time to submit written questions will begin today at 4 o'clock and will end tomorrow, March 5th at 4 o'clock. And then continuing on, staying on page 14, the pre-bid conference. So as I mentioned, this is your one opportunity to have live interaction with the legal supports RFP team and to ask any verbal questions you have. Again, if you do have a question that comes up after we close the pre-bid, you can submit that in writing from today at 4 o'clock until tomorrow, the 5th at 4 o'clock. In order to submit the question, you do have to go into the CAP system, and there will be an Ask a Question link in the top ribbon. That's where you'll have to go, and you would just click there to submit the question. So just a note that we cannot accept emailed questions, so please make sure you're submitting your questions through that tab. And we will have a response to those written questions and the verbal questions from this pre-bid. We will post that in one document. It'll be posted in CAPS under the solicitation attachment section no later than March the 12th. And we do strongly encourage you to review the Q&A document once it becomes available. Again, you would log into CAPS, you would go under the solicitation attachments, and you would be able to download the document from there. Skipping down to page 16 and 17, I'm just going to touch on the terms of agreement and the core contract. The initial term of this contract will be October 1st, 2025 through September 30th, 2026. And this procurement will then have 4 optional renewal periods, as you can see on the screen, those 4 renewal periods. And at the end of that paragraph, at the end of that section is a paragraph that talks about the core contract, which you can find our core contract template in attachment 6. But we just want to make clear that the terms and the conditions of the core contract are not negotiable. So please ensure you read that core contract and you're comfortable with what's in there before you submit an application. And then moving on to page 19 and 20, the conflict of interest section. So if you believe you have a conflict of interest as an applicant, you must disclose the nature and the existence of that conflict. In the actual application, as you go through it, there is a specific question that will ask about a conflict of interest, and it'll go into more detail about what we do consider a conflict. And this is the place that you would disclose any potential conflicts. And then on page 21, the application rating tool, we just want to point out that the rating tool is what the raters are going to receive and what they're going to use to rate your application. You can find the rating tool for this procurement in attachment 2. And we do recommend that you review the rating tool and compare it to your answers and ensure your answers are within the parameters of the rating tool. And then finally, I'm going to go back up to page 14 and 15 just to touch on the CAPS system. CAPS is CSC's web-based system for submission and rating of procurement applications. If you haven't used the system before, there is a video available on the CSC website, and it's also available within the procurement under the solicitation attachments section. And if you have any technical questions on how to use CAPS, you can submit those to our help desk. You can see the address on your screen, but it's helpdesk@cscbroward.org. And you could submit those up until the due date of the application, which is March 31st at 4 p.m. We do try to answer as quickly as possible, but we can't guarantee an immediate response, and the help desk is open during business hours. So please keep that in mind as you plan out the completion of your application. And then just two more things I want to note, and then I'll open up for questions on my section. You will be asked when you start an application for a proposal contact. If you've ever applied with us in the past, that used to be something you would include on your certificate of accuracy and compliance, but now you're being asked to put that in a specific field as you start your application. So I just want to be clear that this proposal contact person is the only person that we will contact if there's a cure for that proposal. So please make sure you ensure that it's somebody who's available during the cure time frame, which you will find in the timetable. And it's also the person who we will send the information to on your applicant interview date and time. So just please keep those things in mind as you choose who your proposal contact is. And just a quick note, we've made some changes in our SAMIS Nexus system to accounts just for security reasons. If you had an account and you haven't logged in 365 days or more, your account will have been deactivated. So if you attempt to log in and you see that you can't get in because your account is deactivated, please just send a ticket to the help desk, again, helpdesk@cscbroward.org, and they will reactivate your account. And Walter, you had a question?
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you very much for this opportunity to ask questions. And you may have said this, I apologize. And I can't think of my question. Oh, jeez, I can't,
Don't worry. If it comes back up, just raise your hand. Even if, we're in a different section, if it comes back to you, feel free, raise your hand, and we'll be able to answer it for you. Did anybody else have any questions on this particular section?
I do remember my question, if I may.
Okay.
Will all of the Q&As that are submitted either orally today or in written between now and 4, they will also be posted in CAPS publicly?
Correct, yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And you answered the technical, if we have technical issues, help desk. Thank you very much.
Yes. Yep. All right, if there's no other questions for me right now, I'm going to hand it over to Lisa, who's going to start to talk about the legal support section.
Good afternoon. I'm Lisa Bain. I'm one of the directors of program services. We're going to start by just pointing out a few things on the timeline that we want to make sure you're aware of. The deadline for submission of the agency financial viability section of the application must be submitted by March 17th at 4 p.m. This must be submitted in order to submit your RFP application. The deadline for submission of the RFP application via CAPS is March 31st by 4 o'clock, no exceptions, 4 p.m. The applicant interviews are April 28th in person at CSC. The council will determine the awards on May 15th, and the contracts will be effective October 1st. we go to page 5, under the Who May Apply section, applicants with specific expertise in dependency law, delinquency law, and related systems and practices. Applicants may be nonprofit organizations, for-profit organizations, incorporated or qualified to do business in the state of Florida, or government entities. For the statement of desired community results, the intent of the Legal Supports Program is to provide legal representation and advocacy to youth in the dependency or delinquency systems and to youth who are dually involved in both systems. This program shall also include a legal helpline for families to call an experienced attorney for legal information and assistance with questions involving juvenile delinquency, diversion, civil citation, and/or dependency. For the service goal, this program is under service goal 6, which is our child welfare supports, to increase the number of children living in safe and nurturing families with a desired outcome that the Broward community will have an effective, high quality, and family-focused dependency system of care. We're also under system goal 3, to provide leadership and resources to attract and maximize additional resources at the local, state, and federal level. This has a desired outcome that services and resources are available in the community that meet the needs of Broward County's children and families. Now, if you look in the box in the middle of the page, we expect to budget approximately $2,750,000 for an organization to provide an effective legal supports program for fiscal year 25-26. We anticipate 1 award for this program. As Tricia mentioned earlier, the contract may be eligible for up to 4 renewal periods. I'm going to go ahead and have Natalie present.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Natalie Gomes. I'm a programs manager, also with program services with CSC. So for this program, the desired population that is served by this program includes youth and children who are either involved with the dependency system, the delinquency system, or are dually involved with both systems or at risk for dual involvement with both. So this section of your RFP summarizes the specific populations, and that defines children and youth through the age of 17 who are involved in delinquency, dependency, or both systems, as I mentioned. And Broward County residents with children who are involved in both the delinquency, dependency, or both systems, or at risk, who need advice to navigate the system via the legal telephone helpline. Okay. It is also important to reference or note that youth who are involved in extended foster care may also be served at the time of enrollment through the age of 20. Okay. So this is your service population. The program components related to this program are varied, and they adjust slightly based on the system that you're serving and the youth that you're serving and the system they're involved in. Specifically, if you are providing legal advocacy and assistance to youth involved in dependency, this program must be prepared to identify and pursue placement needs for the children with least restrictive placements. That includes relatives and non-relatives. Must utilize substitute judgment on behalf of the children and youth they serve in order to protect and preserve the children's rights under state and federal laws. It must attend and participate in case planning staffings, permanency staffings to advocate for the rights of the children and youth that they serve, and to monitor the progress of the parents' compliance in the case plan, the child advocates' involvement, as well as other stakeholders involved with that youth and those children. Overall, these efforts must seek to decrease the length of time that children spend in foster care and expedite their opportunity for permanency. It must decrease the numbers of moves that children have if that is something that is facing that child while they're involved in the dependency system. It must also facilitate meetings with all the parties involved, managing attorney, community stakeholders, and identify different barriers and systemic issues that may be impacting the opportunity for that child to achieve permanency in a timely way. Okay. For children who are involved in the delinquency system, that system dictates the specifics that are necessary for that youth's case to move forward. And the program must be prepared to file documents, file motions, attend court hearings on behalf and with the youth, communicate with school personnel, caregivers, parents, and other parties involved with the delinquency case. Okay. For the helpline, which is an integral component of this program, this helpline must be established and staffed with someone who can provide legal advice to anyone who wants to find out information about involvement in the dependency and/or delinquency system or dual involvement in both. There must also be marketing efforts created and promoted to make sure that the community is aware of the availability of the legal helpline for residents of Broward County to be able to call and to get information related to these systems. Okay. And this program provides no cost legal representation for the children and youth and the families that are connected to these two systems, dependency, delinquency, and dual involvement in both. Okay. These program participants must work closely with stakeholders that include the Department of Children and Families, ChildNet, the Guardian Ad Litem program, and other DJJ, Department of Juvenile Justice, and other system stakeholders on behalf of the youth and children that they serve in this program. It is important to note that when you're identifying the needs of the youth and the children, depending on the case and depending on the system they're involved in, these services must be tailored to serve the needs of that child or that sibling group and their specific case. And the duration of services are also dictated by the needs and the specifics of that case. Youth must voluntarily accept services. While services are identified via these systems, the youth must voluntarily accept services. Providers have to follow a trauma-informed service delivery model because children and youth and the families that are involved are experiencing the trauma of loss and separation, and service delivery must be delivered from that lens and from that perspective. It is also very important to note that any provider who offers and provides these services must agree to comply with any and all reporting and documentation requirements necessary for Title IV-E federal guidelines. The Department of Children and Families contracts with CSC to reimburse and draw down federal dollars through Title IV-E funding. And this provider must maintain the documentation and the reporting and data in order to be able to comply with those contractual requirements with the Department of Children and Families. Okay. All right, on to staffing requirements. Staffing this program, attorneys must have the training, experience, and skills and qualifications that will effectively allow them to represent youth and children in the dependency and/or delinquency systems. Attorneys must be licensed to practice law within the state of Florida. They cannot be law students. While the programs can work with law students to expand the capacity of the program, law students cannot provide direct advocacy, cannot represent children in court. They are simply there to assist if the program chooses to do so. Direct representation must be provided by attorneys who are licensed to practice law within the state of Florida. They are also attorneys who have met the background screening requirements and are in good standing with the Florida Bar Association. Staff training and development related to the specific subject matter. CSC requires that there are some mandatory trainings for any of the staff who participate in this program. And those include domestic violence as it relates to child abuse, substance abuse as it relates to child abuse and neglect prevention, and trauma-informed care. Those are the minimum requirements by CSC and are made available through the CSC Training Collaborative or can be secured through other approved training vendors, but they are not the sum total of the training requirements, as additional may be required or requested by CSC upon request. Now, I just want to reiterate the statement I mentioned before about Title 4E, if we could go to page 5. So as I said before, CSE contracts with the Department of Children and Families to claim federal Title 4E reimbursement for the legal representation of children and youth who are in the dependency system. And so any program, any provider who manages this program must comply with these federal Title 4E guidelines and requirements to enable CSE to claim the reimbursement for these services. And then if we can go ahead over to attachment number 5. All right, here we are. And for your reference, attachment 5 summarizes the research related to the background and the program rationale that supports legal support services. Okay, within this section, there are references national as well as local outcomes and information related to this subject for your reference as needed. Are there any questions related to this section? Oh, yes, Walter. Good afternoon. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Yes, it's been only a few years. I wanted to, when you said this section, going back to standards, or is there a definition of what, so on page 7, program components under legal advocacy and assistance, it says utilize substitute judgment. Is that defined, or are we free to define that as a term of art?
It is not defined on this page, but we can define that in writing at a later time so that it is clear.
Would that be appropriate for a question to submit for clarification?
Absolutely.
In the past, am I allowed to talk about previous contracts? Is that all right?
I think so.
Okay, in the past, we have been asked to also consider express positions or expressed interest. And so I wanted to know what substitute judgment, how that's being defined.
Okay. So I think that will be responded to in writing in the question and answer section.
Walter, just to be clear, so your question is, how are we defining substitute judgment?
Right, and in the past, we've been asked to use substitute and or expressed interest or expressed judgment, expressed position, which is where, and my understanding is substitute judgment is what would someone who cannot speak, what would they say if you understanding everything about their lives or everything about them, what would they say? And I know it's not a good, it's the Terry Schiavo case where some people said what's best for her, and some people said knowing everything we know about her, our substitute judgment is if she could speak, this is what she would say.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
There were no other questions. I will move on to Marissa.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to just grab my notes here. My name is Marissa Greif-Hackett. I am the Director of Program Evaluation here at CSC. And I'm going to provide an overview of the measuring impact and continuous learning sections and the performance measure sections. And these are available in more detail from pages 9 through 13, and attachments 3 and 4, which contain more detail about the performance measures matrices. So we use a results-based accountability model to evaluate our programs. It is founded on 3 questions. How much did we do? How well did we do it? And is anybody better off? And we also view the data collection cycle as an opportunity to learn and improve services while doing the work. And so you can read more about that in pages 9 through 13. The performance measures matrix in attachment 3. Sorry, I can't see everyone at the same time. Are we bouncing around to that? No. Okay. I'll describe it as you find it on screen. The performance measures matrix on attachment 3 outlines the proposed components for the dependency component of the RFP. We use a variety of means to look at the performance there, such as reaching permanency goals and meeting benchmarks towards those goals. In attachment 4, you can see the proposed performance measures for the delinquency component of the RFP. And these include measures around delinquency risk, health outcomes, school outcomes, housing stability, and law violations. Legal hotline data also includes the types of calls received. So we require that data be entered into a database delivery system here at CSC, and we review those data regularly to ensure that they are entered on a timely basis. We also review a selection of hard copy documentation during program performance reviews to ensure that it's being completed according to our business rules and entered in the database accurately. That is my summary, and I can take questions, if any. Okay, so not hearing any questions. Remember, you can review the document and submit questions to which we will respond in writing. Okay, thank you.
And then next comes Mina.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mina Razavi, and I am the Assistant Director of Finance. I will start by reviewing a very important area of your RFP submission, the agency financial viability section, page 50.
Kiona, can you give me access to share so I can share for Mina? Thank you.
You should have access.
Your agency's most recent audited or reviewed financial statements that cover the latest fiscal year end must be submitted in caps before submitting the RFP application. The financials must be submitted by Monday, March 17 by 4 p.m. Based on the audited or reviewed financial statements submitted, CSC will perform the financial viability test, which determines the maximum funding that may be awarded to an agency. Please remember to submit audited or reviewed financial statements in caps, not the viability test. After the initial review of the audited or reviewed financial statements, CSC allows for a financial viability review period for clarification or to provide additional financial information as requested. This period will also allow the agency to obtain a fiscal sponsor if needed. You can expect to receive the results of the financial viability test no later than Thursday, March 20th. Applicants will receive an email with the results and will also see the results once they log into the application in caps. Please be sure to check for your results. If an agency fails to submit the agency financial viability section in caps by the deadline, the agency will not be able to apply for this procurement. If you are currently funded by the CSC and have already submitted your agency's most recent audited or reviewed financial statements to the CSC, you must indicate this by checking the appropriate box in caps in the agency financial viability section. If you are currently funded by the CSC and utilize a fiscal sponsor, or if the CSC does not currently fund you, but you already know your agency will require a fiscal sponsor, you do not have to submit your agency's financial statements. However, you must indicate the agency is using or will be obtaining a fiscal sponsor by checking the appropriate box in caps in the agency financial viability section. Let's continue with the general financial viability requirements, which you can read more in detail on page 24 and 25. All agencies requesting or renewing funding from the CSC must demonstrate a financial solvency utilizing a financial viability test based on audited financial statements, which is a required section of your application. Agencies with annual revenues greater than $500,000 will provide an audit conducted in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards. If the agency has less than $500,000 in annual revenues, and a Florida CPA does not yet audit the agency's financial statements, the following guidelines would apply. Submit financial statements that have been reviewed by a Florida CPA. Reviewed financial statements include a statement of financial position, a statement of activity, a cash flow statement, and notes to the financial statements. If selected for funding, the agency must agree to provide an audit by an independent Florida CPA within 180 days after the end of the agency's fiscal year. Let's discuss your financial viability and performance requirements further. Attachment number 7. The statements you submit will allow us to perform this test. Financial ratios. The test reviews 4 areas. The current ratio. These are the current assets an agency has, which can easily be converted into cash to pay current expenses. Months of liquid net assets. This is the number of months of expenses that existing assets can cover without restriction attached to them. Current liability as a percentage of annual expenses. This is the ability of an organization to meet its current obligation. The debt ratio. This is the proportion of assets provided by debt. Once the total points are calculated, the final score will determine the maximum level of funding that may be awarded to an agency over the CSC fiscal year. If the score is 14 points or over, the status is no award limitations. If the score falls between 10 to 13 points, the status is conditional and award amounts will be limited to a maximum of $237,500 annually. If the score is between 6 to 9 points, the status is provisional and award amounts will be limited to the maximum of $89,000 annually. Funded agencies must demonstrate an ongoing capacity to meet CSC financial performance standards. If an agency's financial viability status changes during an RFP funding cycle, appropriate revisions to funding or contract terms may be necessary at the time of the renewal. Let's now give you information about fiscal sponsor, which you can read more in details on pages 27 and 28. This fiscal sponsor's role is to receive and administer funding provided by the CSC, act as a capacity building resource for the agency carrying out the program activities, and serve as an accountable provider of record in a trial party agreement. Agencies wishing to apply for funding beyond the restrictions resulting from the financial viability test may secure a fiscal sponsor that can pass the annual fiscal test without restrictions. CSA will provide an unrestricted fiscal sponsorship fee directly to a fiscal sponsor to help offset the administrative costs incurred by the sponsoring agency. The fee will be up to 7% of the total funds awarded to the sponsored agency, not to exceed $25,000 annually. Let's now discuss your budget form. Your budget form is attachment number 10 in your RFP packet and program budget form. This is a critical part of the process, and we have provided some resources to assist you in creating your program budget form. Your guidelines to assist you in preparing the budget are in attachment number 9. Some areas of your budget include page 17, startup expenses. You may include startup expenses in your budget. Startup expenses are budget items needed to prepare and start the program from October 1st, 2025 to December 31st, 2025. These may include, but are not limited to, hiring and training staff, getting sites prepared, purchasing materials, furniture and laptops, and establishing a relationship and referral process with dependency and delinquency court administration before direct service delivery. Startup expenses must be fully utilized by the end of the first 90 days of the contract period. Let's now discuss units of service, page 17 and 18. Units are expenses that are not reimbursed on a cost reimbursement basis, but are rolled up into a unit cost. These are your operational costs. The expenses included in determining the unit cost include your salaries, benefits, local travel, materials, and supplies. Once awarded, your contract will identify the maximum number of units that can be billed to the CSC. You can see the sample units of service on page 18 in RFP. Match requirement, page 18 and 19. There is a funding requirement of at least a 5% match for all funding provided through the CSE as we seek to fund projects that can operate in a fiscally sound manner. Your match can be provided as cash or an in-kind contribution, such as volunteers, administrative overhead, equipment, or a space dedicated to the project. Administrative costs, page 19. Applicants may request up to 12% of the total direct service costs in administrative costs to manage the project. Administrative costs support the operation of your entire agency as a whole and are related to the agency's day-to-day operations and pertain to operation expenses rather than those expenses that are directly related to the provision of services. These include, but are not limited to, payroll costs, management staff salaries, and audit fees. Remember, the deadline for submitting the agency fiscal viability section of application via CAPS is Monday, April 17 by 4 p.m. If there is any question about this, about the information I shared, please raise your hand and you will be counted. Okay, there is no question. If there is no question, now I will turn it over to Trisha.
Thank you, Mina. I think at the very end, you may have misspoken and said April 17th. I just want to clarify that the agency financial viability deadline is March 17th at 4 p.m.
It's March 17th. Sorry, it's March 17th. Thank you for correcting.
You're welcome. I did want to just share my screen and show you guys exactly what the financial viability section looks like. So this is what Mina has been talking about. You can see here, it's the very first section once you start your application. And as you can see here on the side, all of the sections you have to complete for this application, they all have a deadline of 3/31/25 at 4 p.m., except the agency financial viability section, which as we mentioned is due March 17th by 4 p.m. So as Mina mentioned, every single applicant has to complete this section, no matter what your situation is. There's 4 options that will be available to you. So the first 2 options is for you to upload your own either audited or reviewed statements. So if you click on audited, it will give you an overview of what your revenue needs to look like for the audited statements, and it'll give you an option to upload the statements. If it's reviewed statements, again, it gives you an overview of who would need the reviewed statements, and it gives you the option to upload them. The other 2 options you have is to tell us that CSC currently has your most recent audited or reviewed statement. So this would be for agencies that are currently funded by CSC, and you know that you have already provided CSC with your most recent statements. And then the 4th option available to you is that the agency chooses not to submit any financial statements as they will assign a fiscal sponsor. So again, even if this is the option you're choosing, you don't have to submit any statements, but you do still have to go in and complete this section, choose this option, and submit this section by March 17th at 4 p.m. And again, as Mina mentioned, if this section is not completed by the deadline, you will not be able to continue on with the application. So does anybody have any questions on this section? And I can't see hands, so if anyone has a question, please just unmute. I'm not hearing any. Okay, so I'm gonna pass it back to Maria to close us out.
So that is the end of our pre-bid conference. Want to make sure there are no questions from anybody.
So the question I asked about the definition of substitute judgment is, should we resubmit that in writing?
You
Would
know,
that be-
Walter, I think it would be a good idea if you would submit it in writing to us. I've written
Oh.
down what you said, but you may, in that question, provide additional clarification so that we're making sure that we answer it to the best of our ability.
Thank you, I'll do that.
Thank you. So you will have until March 5th at 4 o'clock to submit any written questions to us. And we will post the questions and answers in a document on the CAP system by March 12th. So the questions and answers from this pre-bid and any written questions that come in afterwards will be posted in the CAP system in a combined document by March 12th. And we strongly encourage you to go to that document and download it and review it. That document supersedes this pre-bid conference. We look at your questions and what we've answered in this conference. And if there are more details we can provide to give you better direction, then we do that. So the question and answer document supersedes this meeting. So I want to make sure that you all please go and download that document. So does anyone have any last minute questions before we close the pre-bid? So,
Holly?
If there's no other questions, you guys will have until March 5th, 2025 at 4 o'clock to send us any written questions. So there's still time to do the written questions. I want to thank you all for taking time out of your really busy schedules to join us today in this pre-bid conference and for asking us clarifying questions. We appreciate it. I hope you guys have a great afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for your time and guidance.